There are always risks for a promotion when they decide to put one of their titles on any given performer. The talent could bomb, they could get injured or suspended while holding it and thus need to vacate, or they could, have their title stolen while eating at a Longhorn Steakhouse. The wrestler themselves may also decide that they like holding onto the title so much that they don't want to drop it. Be it due to contract disputes, personal beefs, or just plain old being Shawn Michaels, a wrestler refusing to drop their title when asked can lead to plenty of problems. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 wrestlers who refused to drop their title. Join us. Number 10, Rey Mysterio. Rey Mysterio is one of wrestling's true good guys, a career babyface who is beloved by all, from fans to his co-workers. Though the Masked Man has been a model employee for the vast majority of the last 30 or so years, there have been a couple of instances of him speaking up and using his veteran status to change creative plans. One such time was in the summer of 2009, when Rey was reigning as Intercontinental Champion. Mysterio and Chris Jericho had been battling for months and trading the title in a great program that not only enhanced their own stock, but made the title itself feel more important too. Rey was puzzled then when the order came for him to drop the strap to Dolph Ziggler at the Night of Champions pay-per-view just 1 month after beating Y2J for the gold. The Biggest Little Man successfully argued that he deserved a longer run with the title and convinced Vince McMahon that he shouldn't pass it on to the show-off. Rey beat Ziggler at Night of Champions and then a month later at SummerSlam, but a wellness policy violation saw him being forced to lose it to John Morrison shortly after. Number 9, the Honky Tonk Man. The longest reigning Intercontinental Champion in WWE history almost had his record-setting run with the gold ended 6 months earlier than it did. Vince had asked Honky to lose his treasured title to Randy Savage on the NBC special The Main Event. The Dime Store Elvis impersonator, however, flat out refused to do it. No, he was against the plan because he knew the show would be watched by tens of millions of people and that such a high-profile loss would hurt his bargaining power if he wanted to go somewhere else, like WCW. Apparently, he got his way because the match ended in a countout and the Honky Tonk Man retained. Not that Savage would have minded too much, since he won the WWE title at WrestleMania 4 just 6 weeks later. As for the Honky Tonk Man, he ended up getting steamrolled by the Ultimate Warrior at SummerSlam, a destruction job from which he never really recovered. Number 8, Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar has always marched to the beat of his own drum and done business the way that he thinks is best for Brock. It was true when he decided to walk away from WWE in 2004 in order to chase a long-shot NFL dream, and it was true in 2006 when he walked away from New Japan Pro Wrestling while reigning as their IWGP Heavyweight Champion due to a pay dispute. The Beast had won the title in his first night in the Far East and defended it a few times across 7 matches, including a win over a young Shinsuke Nakamura inside the Tokyo Dome. As he left what turned out to be his final tour for the promotion, Antonio and Simon Inoki tried to get him to leave the belt with them so that they could polish it up for when he returned. Wink, wink. Brock was intent to keep hold of it, however, as an insurance policy until the money matters were taken care of. New Japan tried to get him to come back later in order to drop the title, but when the two sides couldn't agree on a dollar amount, Lesnar stayed on the farm. He eventually lost the championship many moons later to Kurt Angle for Inoki's new IGF promotion. Number 7, Stan Hansen. Stan Hansen wore his outlaw spirit on his pearl-snapped sleeves, feared as a wild man in the ring and noted as a savvy businessman outside of it. The lariat was not one to be messed with by wrestlers or the office, as Greg Gagne and the AWA found out in 1986. The flagging organization had made Hansen their world champion after Rick Martel had failed to properly take off as top dog. It was a surprise to Stan, who primarily made his living in Japan, where he was considered a legend, but he was happy to shoulder the responsibility and looked forward to working with the likes of rising star Kurt Hennig. 6 months into his reign and already feeling dissatisfied with how it had turned out from a cash and creative standpoint, Hansen balked at the request that he drop the title out of the blue to Nick Bockwinkel on a show in Denver, Colorado. Hansen was stripped of the title by the AWA, but toured Japan as champion and even defended it in spite of the fact. The AWA threatened to sue unless he returned it, which Hansen did, but not before running over it with his truck. Number 6. Hulk Hogan. The closing scenes of WrestleMania 9 certainly bothered Bret Hart, who lost his WWE title in the main event to Yokozuna, only to have his best buddy Hulk Hogan come in and win the belt himself in an impromptu match. The hard-working hitman felt robbed of his big moment at the Showcase of the Immortals, but he lived with it because he knew eventually the Hulkster would do the honors for him, and he would get the belt back. Right? Wrong, brother! Turns out Hogan wasn't into the whole losing the WWE title to Bret Hart thing, and backed out of their planned SummerSlam showdown. Instead, Terrible Terry agreed to lay down for Yokozuna at the King of the Ring. He was happy taking an L against a super heavyweight who received an assist from an exploding camera, but Hogan wasn't about to do any sort of torch passing with the excellence of execution. Bret seemed cool with the whole situation, mind, and hasn't constantly brought it up for the last 30 years. Number 5. Sable. Holding a championship belt obviously doesn't automatically make you a better wrestler, as evidenced by the fact that the untrained Sable held the women's title during the Attitude Era. In the Vince Russo penned world of WWE at the time, belts were little more than props, bro, and the women's title in particular was a low priority. But the blonde bombshell was a star, no doubt, and she knew it. The television ratings and merch sales told her as much every single week. So when Sable was asked to drop the strap to veteran Luna Vachon at the 1999 Royal Rumble, she refused. And what were WWE going to do? After all, she was the one drawing in millions of people and gracing the cover of Playboy, while Luna was talented and respected, but ultimately caused many backstage headaches with her erratic behavior. Sable never really lost the title properly, ultimately dropping it to Deborah despite being victorious in their evening gown match, because Commissioner Shawn Michaels was overcome by his horniness and named Deborah the winner because he could see more of her flesh. Number 4. Ric Flair. Former WCW Executive Vice President Jim Herd rightly and wrongly gets a lot of flack for the 3 tumultuous years that he was in charge of the promotion. The absurd gimmicks and storylines the former Pizza Hut manager pitched angered and frustrated fans and performers, but there was one star who butted heads with Herd more than most. Ric Flair was already established as an all-time great at this point and was one of the most popular stars in the company, but Jim felt that his appearance and gimmick needed changing and that his time as a main event talent was over. As part of his plan to push the Nature Boy down the card, he asked Flair to drop the WCW heavyweight title to Lex Luger. Slick Rick said no, since he had already promised to drop the title to Sting, who was injured at the time, while also believing that the total package wasn't yet ready to hold the 10 pounds of gold. Flair attempted to compromise and offered to put over Barry Windham instead, but Herd fired him, and this resulted in the dirtiest player in the game keeping possession of the belt, while the EVP booked Luger to go over Windham for a newly created World Heavyweight Championship. Number 3. Chyna. If Chyna had things her way, she would have been WWE champion and wrestling the likes of Steve Austin and The Rock on a weekly basis. WWE didn't have the same vision for the 9th wonder of the world, but tried to accommodate her by booking her to win the Intercontinental title and then giving her a dominant run as women's champ. After flattening Ivory like a bug to win the belt at WrestleMania X7, Chyna embarked on a friendly feud with Lita. The flame-haired Daredevil and Team Extreme member had gotten over huge as a babyface, and the company wanted to give her a push to match her popularity. While they wanted Chyna to drop the women's title to Lita, Chyna herself wasn't convinced. She liked Lita and was looking forward to working with her, but felt as though she should be protected more, especially since she spent the last several years wrestling and beating many of the men. Chyna did raise Lita's hand after beating her in their Judgment Day meeting, the first of a planned series of matches that never ended up happening, as Joni Laura soon exited the company in acrimony. Number 2. Bret Hart. You might have heard of this one, I'll be quick.
As Bret Hart was working the remainder of his WWE contract before jumping to rival WCW in late 1997, Vince McMahon asked the Hitman to drop the WWE title to Shawn Michaels. This might not have been an issue a couple of years prior, but by this point a lot of very real bad blood had built up between the two, with Michaels telling Hart that if the roles were reversed, he wouldn't do the honors for him. Added to this was the fact that the planned title change was scheduled to take place in Bret's native Canada. The excellence of execution felt that losing such a high-profile bout on home soil would have done serious damage to his reputation as a Canadian hero. no. Bret did agree to lose the title elsewhere, and to others even suggesting that he would be happy to lose it to the Brooklyn Brawler if that's what Vince wanted. And in the end, all involved agreed that the 1997 Survivor Series main event would end in a big schmoz, with members of DX and the Hart Foundation running in for the DQ.
Well, Bret thought that's what they'd all agreed to. Number 1, Shawn Michaels. I mean, really, where do you even start? Shawn Michaels is one of the GOATs, yes, but he was also, for the longest time, an absolute nightmare as far as his backstage attitude and politicking went, and no wrestler in history has lost so many titles without actually losing them. The Heartbreak Kid was far from bowled over when asked to do the JOB, especially if he was in possession of a championship belt. There was always a way to forfeit the thing, whether it was hiding behind a dubious-looking injury or simply flat out saying no when the topic came up. He wouldn't lose the Intercontinental title to Dean Douglas, turned his nose up at passing the WWE title to Vader, misplaced his smile rather than returning the favor to Bret Hart at WrestleMania 13, and basically gave the European title to DX buddy Triple H in a farcical so-called match. There's also been speculation that the showstopper denied then undefeated Tatanka an IC title victory at Mania 9, that he and Diesel weren't going to drop the tag titles and so vacated them instead, and that he was contemplating not losing the WWE title to Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 14 before The Undertaker convinced him that the other way would probably be better.